So I just realized something. Now, bear with me. Okay, so 1776, John Quincy Adams, Samuel Adams, the bastard. Okay, Boy Meets World, you were John Adams High School, okay? And then the HBO series of John Adams, which you were... Foolishly, they didn't ask you to even do a cameo, but Dave Morris, who was in St. Elsewhere with you, played George Washington, St. Elsewhere, Denzel Washington, and then on St. Elsewhere, you sang lines from 1776. So are you the Illuminati?
What is an Illuminati?
I am the hard hitter, quick witter, rhyme spitter. We go deep with Meryl Streep if my people could ever get her. 10-minute conversations with my best friends. It's time to begin. Chalkskin 10.
We love movies. We love television and theater. The stories, they engage us. They stick with us. They change us. You know, the writers and the directors, they play a very important part, of course, but when the lights go up and the curtains raise, it comes down to the actor and to their performance. When the actor is really great and they're living in the moment and they draw us in, we leave maybe a better person. And it's magic because you feel like you have a kinship with a total stranger. You feel like you've made a new friend. Well, today we're going to speak with a man who has been performing and engaging audiences for over 7 decades. We're going to meet the man behind the characters that we love so much, Mr. William Daniels. Hello.
You did that very well.
Well, thank you.
Did you practice or?
Yeah, a little bit of practice.
Good for you.
Do you mind if I call you Bill?
No, absolutely. Please do.
Excellent. We're friends now, Internet.
Much too formal. Yes.
And Mr. Daniels is even more.
No. No. Bill is good.
Excellent. So you started as a tap dancer when you were 4 years old. What drew you to the spotlight?
An ambitious mother, who these days they call a showbiz mom. You know, she had her desires. She had a good voice and could sing, but she never had the opportunity to be in show business. So as soon as she had children, she was going to make damn sure they were going to be in show business. And the 3 of us, my 2 sisters and I, wound up in show business.
That's excellent. How long did it take before you enjoyed that part, that process? When, at what age did you realize what you were doing on stage and kind of be drawn into that?
I'm still working on that. I don't know. Let me think a second. I think I have always been ambivalent about being in the business I'm in, since it wasn't really my choice. I was put into it. But after using that excuse for years, I finally realized that I'm in where I belong and I enjoy what I'm doing. And but that didn't come along until very late in the game, when I started to at least make a living, you know. Because at the beginning, you know, my mother's mantra was, this is experience. So we did a lot of benefits for Nick Kenny, who was a columnist for the Daily Mirror at the time. He had a bunch of kids. This was the 30s, you know, where children performed a lot in those days. It was the Depression, and you didn't have to pay them, and you know, there were audiences there for kids, and we certainly played to those audiences. First with Nick, going benefits everywhere, but then on the Horn and Harder Children's Hour, and then our own little radio show. It just kind of developed that way.
Absolutely, yeah. You were born 2 years before the Depression struck, and your dad was a builder.
Yes. Actually, more accurately, a bricklayer.
Oh, excellent.
And bricklayers had a hard time in that time. First of all, because there was not a lot of work around, but he was terribly good at it, although he hated it. He hated it. He really had opportunities, but they put him to work when he was very young. But he was a terrific bricklayer, and so he always worked when there was work. But, you know, if it rained, if it snowed, there was no work, and in the Depression, there was a lack of work. So there were hard times there when we were kids. I don't remember it being a hard time, but I do remember a lot of potato pancakes for dinner, so I knew there wasn't not a lot of money around.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, speaking of the Horn and Hardart show, that was definitely one of the earliest television shows that there was.
That's right.
Yeah, so what would those... and then you eventually moved on to have your own radio show, The Daniels Family.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we did that show. I forget if it was for NBC or maybe ABC, one of those networks. And we had it was a little 15-minute show of songs from the Daniels Family, which was my sister Jackie and my little sister Carol, who unfortunately got the nickname Termite.
How did she get the nickname Termite?
Well, because when we were on the Horn and Hardart Children's Hour, we would have rehearsals on Saturday over at NBC and do the show on Sunday. And she was like 2 or 3 years old, and so she was dragged along. And she'd be crawling around under the piano while we were rehearsing. And Alice Clements, the producer of the show, began calling her, "Have we got termites under there?" And that name unfortunately stuck because she was a beautiful little girl, and Carol. And so that was our life in those days. Saturday rehearsal, Sunday first of all it was radio, and then it went to television. And that, besides doing benefits for Nick Kenny in the evenings, we were pretty busy kids.
Did you work the vaudeville circuit?
It was almost dead by then, you know. So no, we didn't do vaudeville. But Nick Kenny had this group of kids that he would take out, and we would perform all over veterans places, for hospitals and and Elks clubs and wherever. My mother kept saying, "It's experience, Bill. It's experience." "Okay, Mom." You know, it was that kind of thing.
So your sisters, it was Karen, right?
Jacqueline, Jackie, and Carol.
Yeah, and Carol.
Yeah.
Are they? Did they stay with the acting?
My sister Jackie stayed for a while. She wound up doing Ado Annie in Oklahoma and London. She opened that show in London, which was a huge hit. It was the first musical after the war that went to London. It was a tremendous hit. And she was doing Ado Annie, and that was an exciting time for her. What else?
And your other sister?
Well, Carol came along about 9 years after us. So she was, so she was a little kiddo. Unfortunately, they put her on really too young on radio and television. I guess it was television. So it was only later that I realized that she was scared to death about it. Oh, yes. And Carol, when she was about 7 or 8, Bonnie, did a play with Walter Houston called Apple of His Eye, and he really fell in love with her. He was a great guy, and I had just gotten out of the Army, and I went out and met them, and he took me under his wing, and he was one of those great, open, friendly people, easy to get to know. He was, wasn't standoffish at all, and he really kind of loved his little Carol, and who played his granddaughter in the show. And Jackie stood by for the ingenue, and so both sisters were working when I got out of the Army and went out and met them. That was where my mother said, "Oh, Bill, one of those you know, you wrote the government about going to college. I think one of those were up here. They were in Chicago.
Yeah.
And it turned out that was Northwestern. So that's how I happened to stumble into Northwestern.
Nice. Now, yeah, and you met Howard Lindsay, who kind of encouraged you.
He was, I don't think he was aware of it, but when he came back into Life with Father, he and Russell Crouse had written it, and he played it for a couple of years. Then he had to get out of it, and so it was fortunate. I started as a understudy, and then as I was going in to play the second oldest, John, there were 4 boys in Life with Father. He and Miss Stickney were coming back into the show, so I got to rehearse with them as they refreshed their memories, and that was a great experience. And that's where I got to know him, and that's where he taught me things that has stayed with me forever. For instance, let me give you an example. He'd say to me, "Bill," and I'm how old when I'm at that point? Maybe 15, something like that. He'd say, "Bill, you know, there's a huge laugh here." He said, "Now a laugh will go up to a top, and then it'll start coming down." He says, "You don't want it to come all the way down. You want to stop it just as it starts to ebb off. So the audience will leave feeling that they haven't really laughed as much as they want to. You don't want to wear them out." He said, "So this is a big laugh that's going to be." This was in rehearsal. He said, "Sure, you just look at me, and I'll tell you when to just look in my eyes." And that's the way it worked. This big laugh, and then his eyes just released me, and then I could say my line. But he didn't shake his head or anything. It was just his eyes. I don't know how that happened, but there it was. And he taught me about laughs. He taught me. He also gave me. I remember I went into his dressing room and asked him. I said I was thinking of going to the American Academy of Dramatic Arts, and he was putting his makeup on, you know, and he looked in the mirror. He said, "Close the door." And so I closed the door, and I came over, and he said, "Don't go there." He said, "I'm on the board." He said, "I tell you what you do. You're going to be drafted, and you'll be in the Army, so you'll have the GI Bill. Write the government, find out a university that has a good theater department, and you'll kill 2 birds with 1 stone. You get a college education and theater. You'll learn theater from top to bottom." Yeah. So that's what I did. I wrote the government, and they gave me a bunch of schools like UCLA and Yale and Northwestern. And that's how I got to be at Northwestern and met that lady over there.
Right. Yeah, now, Howard Lindsay, of course, is no slouch. He won a Pulitzer Prize and went on to do The Sound of Music.
But he was a mentor for me, and also his stage behavior, his deportment backstage, as well as he never lectured you, but I just noticed. I copied him. I mean, I was in school, and you know, I couldn't go all the way back to Long Island, so I'd hang around. And I can remember coming in to the empty theater one day, and he was in there because he was coming back into the show, and he was practicing all by himself. Wow. The opening lines that he used to get a big laugh at, all by himself. And I stood in the back. He didn't know I was there, and I thought, wow, that's interesting, you know. And the way he had a soft voice, and he'd go into his dressing room, and then he'd start vocalizing to get his voice up to where Father was. And he'd come out a different man, you know. Wow. He'd go in very soft-spoken and come out, "Hello." It'd be a whole transformation in front of my eyes. I was very impressed with him. Yes.
How important is education to an actor?
You mean formal education? I think formal education helps anyone, really. I happen to have had pretty spotty grade school and even high school. High school for me was an apartment on 53rd Street of Mr. Lodge's, and I would go in, and there would be about 10 kids who were in show business and plays. I was in Like a Father, and I would, hang around for a while and then say I had an appointment, and I'd go down a chock full of nuts and have a coffee and read my New York Times. So that was really spotty. But to get into college, and I'll tell you that story, to get into college, I had to apply. I applied to Northwestern. You had to give them your grades, you see. Mm-hmm. So I had 2 years of high school of music and art, and they could give me my grades. When I asked Mr. Lodge in this apartment that we he called a school, he said, "You're going to college?" This is over the phone.
Wow.
Like, what? I said, "Yes, I need the records, your high school records." "From here?" I said, "Yes, I'm getting them from," and he said, "Well, unfortunately, we had a fire here, and all the records." I said, "Oh my God." He said, "Well, do you remember any of your grades?"
I got straight A's.
I tried not to I'd be greedy. I'd give myself a 92 rather than a 98 or something like that. I just kind of, but he said, "Yes, how about this?" "Oh, 85, I think I got in English, yeah, And he said that he's got this thing he's looking at, and he says, this is over the phone, and he says, "And history?" Then I know it was a scam, because they didn't teach history at large private tutoring. So I said, 90 and history. So I knew he was making this whole damn thing up.
Yeah.
But this is what he sent into Northwestern. That's the way I got in.
That's great. That's a great story. Now, Northwestern University, they give out an award to outstanding performers, and they call it the Willies or the William Daniels Award. And
Can you believe that? That's amazing.
And the mascot is Willie the Bobcat. So what did you do in college that left such a lasting impression?
I have no idea. Bonnie and I, well, if you were in the theater department, you really kind of lived in the theater department, which was had its own little building, Annie Mae something or other building, and you'd hang out there, and you'd either be building sets or acting in plays or rehearsing a play. Mm-hmm. That was your whole life. The rest of the university, was beyond us. But we did plays. She, as a freshman, won an award for doing Barbara Allen. And what was it called, Bob? Dark of the Moon. And I'll tell you how I met her. Okay.
Yeah.
They used to, you would audition in a classroom, and the guy who was going to direct it would be up front. And he'd call on people to read. And the play we were auditioning, all the students, he would call one and then another. It was Erwin Shaw's Bury the Dead. Not a laugh in it. But so, and I've already been on Broadway, so I'm pretty cocky, So I'm there and I listen. Oh boy. And then another one. I'm thinking, I don't know if I want to be in this turkey. And then he says, "Bonnie," and this voice in the back of the room, and it's the first one that was an actor. Mm-hmm. As soon as I heard her read, I know she was an actor. So I looked around, there's this blonde, kind of nice. So I waited at the door, and when we were dismissed at the classroom, I waited at the door, and she came by, and I said, "How about a cup of coffee?" And she said, "You're too short." So I looked at her, I said, "How about a cup of coffee?" She said, "Okay."
How about a short cup of coffee? That's great. Now, you guys have been married for 68 years, right?
Oh, God, is it that long? I suppose.
Is it 68 years?
Well, we met when I was 18 and I'm 85.
Oh.
No,
You guys have been together.
When
We,
you were
we
18.
didn't get married at 18. I was 21 when we got married, but we were together from the time we met at 18.
That's true.
Now, that's hard enough for anybody, but two creative types.
In show business, which doesn't have a reputation for long marriages.
Right. What's the secret to that passion?
Well, I'll be serious. I won't make any jokes.
I'll take a joke, too.
It's a you'll take a joke too. It's a matter. The joke is a lack of imagination, but other than that, there's a kind of a mutual respect, and we are each are the other's best critic in our work.
Oh, nice.
So that, for instance, I'll give you an example. I was in a play that I was uncomfortable in, and Bonnie came to see it in New Haven, and afterwards she said to me, "When you come on, you looked like you didn't want to be on the stage," which was absolutely the truth. And I had to work on that to get rid of that impression. But we really respect each other's work and talent, besides being attracted to each other. Right. So it's been a long deal.
Mm-hmm. Now, you both have won Emmys, and actually are one of only 9 husband and wife couples that have both won Emmys. And
right?
yeah, and I mean, it's like Paul Newman, and it's like really, yeah, it's like these really. But what's great is that you're only, I believe, one of 2 couples that have both won on the same night.
Yes. Yeah. Was there another, maybe Jessica and Hume Cronin?
Yes, I believe that was.
Yes.
No, I forget who it was.
Same night, same show.
Same night, same show. Yeah.
It was Alfred Lunt and Lynn Fontaine.
Alfred Lint and Lynn Fontaine. Yeah.
And I guess you're too old, but they were great.
Were they great?
Very famous theater people, Alfred Lunt and Lynn Fontaine.
So that must have been an incredible night. What did you guys do to celebrate?
I don't know. I guess we went out afterwards, had a cup of coffee or something. What did we do, Bonnie? I don't remember. Well, first of all, we were on St. Elsewhere, and I had received a nomination every year that we were on. So for 2 years, I went to this whole thing, the middle of the afternoon, and it's hot out, and you got to go over there, and it's in a tux and all of that business, and sit there and not get anything. So the 3rd year, they sent a car, and I didn't really want to go. I wanted to watch McEnroe, who was playing tennis on television. And I got in the limo, and he got right up to the corner, and the limo stopped. I said, "Okay, I'm out of here." And I went back, got out of the tux, and turned on the TV, and Bonnie came to me. She said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, the car broke down, Bonnie," and she was in the car, but she had to stay because she was in a gown. Mm-hmm. She said, "I'm all dressed up. I've got my hair done. Get back in your clothes." I said, "Well," she said, "they're sending another car." So I got back in my clothes. Now we're late, right? And we get in the place, and the whole ceremony is going on, and we have to get, excuse me, get into them. And just as I sit down, they say, "William Daniels." And I got up there, and I told them what happened. I told them that the car broke down, and I was walking home and there were these 2 old ladies in a car as I was going under the tunnel up here of the freeway, and they came by and said, "Can we give you a ride?" I said, "No, thank you." I must have looked like Dean Martin coming home from a late night. I had opened up the collar and everything. I said, "Thank you very much." But they followed me, and finally they stopped again and said, "We know who you are, and we really would like to give you a. I said, okay, because it's just a piano. So that's how I got back here. And finally they sent another limo. And so we were late. So I told this story when I got the award. I said, I have to thank these two little old ladies. I hope they're watching. And the press later said, did you make up that story? I said, how could I make up a story like that?
That's awesome. That's a night of both good luck and bad luck and great luck.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that was peculiar.
Yeah. Well, you were nominated 6 times for that show and won twice.
Yes. It was a well received show. It never made big numbers, but we did do 6 seasons, and we had some really tremendously talented people on it, like Denzel and David Morse and Ed Flanders, who's no longer with us. But no, it was a really good show, and the writers, Tom Fontana and the rest of them, kept the quality of the show for a long time up to standards, and so we had a really good, decent run. Dr. Craig I played.
Yep.
Yeah.
Now you have 2 boys, and one of them is an opera singer and the other's an artist, right?
Yes.
How did you encourage their artistic passion?
Well, I didn't, actually. I didn't discourage it, but it was their idea. Robert always had a talent for art, and Michael was always a singer and still sings, but that's not what they do now.
Oh.
They do it. Michael does do it occasionally down at the opera. He will sing in the chorus and so forth, and he loves to sing, so he is in certain choirs around town. And Robert is a businessman in New York, but I didn't encourage them. I didn't discourage them. I thought that I knew that if they wanted to go that course with all of the problems, all of the rejections that you have to weather that storm, then okay, and I think they benefited from the experiences, and but as I say, they now do other things to make a living, because singers find a hard time to make a living.
And art is impossible.
Yes.
And art is impossible, right? Exactly.
So there were a few years where Bonnie was doing really well and you were not doing as well. And there are a lot of struggling artists and actors, and a lot of them are probably watching us right now. Do you have any advice for them?
Try to behave better than I did, because it was difficult when your wife is making all the money. And you're having trouble even getting a job. And this was early on in New York, and Bonnie was playing a lead on a soap opera, and did for 3.5 years. And I was having trouble getting work. I would get an occasional television show, and in those days, if you're on Kraft Musical, Kraft Playhouse, or Studio One, you only get 1 shot a season, and there was no way to make a living. The only thing you could do, if you were lucky, is to get on a series. And in those days, there weren't that many series. So it was a difficult time for me. But that changed, didn't it, after a while?
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Bonnie just reminded me. A friend from Lee Strasberg's class, by the name of Milton Casellas, had this play that he was going to direct. And he sent it to me, and I looked at it. I thought, well, what is this? And it was called The Zoo Story by a guy named Edward Albee. And it's a guy who sits on a bench, and the other guy does all the talking. So I went to audition for it, and I assumed I'd be the guy who does all the talking, you know. So they said, Bill, what would you like to read? I said, well, Jerry, you know. And they said, oh, okay. So I read a little bit, and then they said, Bill, would you mind sitting on the bench and doing Peter? I thought, oh, Christ. So I sat on the bench, and I did a couple of lines, and they started laughing, and I thought, they're going to offer me this damn part. And they did. So I went into it thinking, well, he does all the talking, so the only thing is, none of us understood how the audience was going to treat this play. Edward thought it was a very serious play, so did Milton Katselas, the director, and it was a serious play. So I'm sitting on the bench, and George Maharis, who played Jerry, walks by and stops over here, and I'm reading. And he's dressed, you know, like a bicycle guy and everything, and I'm in a suit. And I hear these words, I've been to the zoo. So all I did was look up, and the audience went. A huge laugh. So, and it continued. So I thought, maybe he's talking to somebody else. So I looked over there, and there was another huge laugh. And then he repeated, I've been to the zoo. So finally, that was the beginning. And the author, the director, nobody understood these laughs.
Wow.
Or expected them, and rushed down to me and said, Bill, you're playing for laughs. I said, I'm not playing for laughs. They said, you're looking at the audience. I said, you have me sitting in front on a bench. Where am I going to look? From here to here? They didn't know it. I didn't know it. But no matter where I played that play, and I played it all over. I played it in South America, where they came with translations because they didn't speak English. There's still that look. Everybody went.
Wow.
And it's what I call a laugh of recognition. Mm-hmm. Anybody has that fear and experience that some stranger is going to come by and in some way be threatening. Mm-hmm. And they all react to that. And that's the beginning of that play.
That's an amazing story, actually. Mm-hmm. So the whole thing evolved from that point.
Yes.
So all the rehearsals.
Yeah. Well, the rehearsals, we never expected it at all. And, you know, I'm on the bench, you know, until I get up and we have this struggle where he commits suicide. Bonnie, what?
Nobody expected. It was a great play, and nobody.
Oh, that's, yeah. Nobody knew Edward Albee. It was before Virginia Woolf and everything. And nobody expected that play to be anything, but it won awards and won me the Clarence Derwin Award, which was terrific because that was $500, which was a whole month's pay of what I was making in the play.
The whole point, point is that when I went to see the play, I hadn't read it or anything. I said, Billy, it's a great play.
Yeah.
He didn't know he was in a great play. This is a great play.
That's awesome. And it changes
And it was,
everything at that point, right?
I know.
Yeah.
It's, you know, I don't think anybody understood how important the play would become. They certainly didn't know about those laughs. You know, I think, and I've been involved with a lot of plays and musicals, and I'm thinking of when I assisted, was Jerry Robbins' assistants on Gypsy and on Oh Dad, Poor Dad. Nobody really knows what you've got until you get it on the stage and you get a reaction from the audience. And that was true of the Zoo Story. It was true of Gypsy. It was certainly true of Oh Dad, Poor Dad. And I think that's what the theater is all about. It's a big chance.
Yeah.
And you don't know. You gotta believe in what you're doing and hope that you got something there.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's too many times where you're in something you think is great.
Yeah, it isn't. Yes. I've been in those too. Yeah.
So you mentioned your class. You studied under who's considered the greatest American theater teacher ever, Lee Strasberg. But you've described it as fighting with him for 4 years. What was your relationship like with Lee?
Well, it started off on the wrong foot because my wife was in his class and his secretary, meaning she got the money from all the students and handed it over to Lee. And Lee was terribly fond of her and respected her talent as an actress. And I just didn't believe that actors should study. I was an idiot. You learn on the stage, you know, the old thing, learn on the boards. But I wanted to keep in touch with her because, you know, she was doing scenes with guys in their apartment. What the hell was going on, you know? So I came to the class for that reason, not to learn anything. I thought you learned on the boards, you know? So my attitude was totally wrong for being in Lee Strasberg's class. So we had a few incidences. When they do scenes, he used to ask for people's reaction to the scenes, you know, and you raise your hand, you know, and there was this one scene, and I thought, oh, Christ. So he asked for, and I raised my hand, I said, well, it didn't have any pace. Well, he jumped up, he said, pace? You're talking about pace? I have been in the theater for 35 years or something like that. Pace, and that's not what this class is about. You know, and that was the beginning of our relationship. Well, he was so fond of her, it became like a family thing. They expected her up at their apartment on Sundays, where they had a kind of a soiree, and wonderful actors who came into town would be there. You'd see Peter O'Toole or God knows who. And I would go along with her. And Lee would offer me a drink, and he'd go and pour a vodka, and then he would go into his study. A whole bunch of people, and he'd go in, and I followed him into his study. So I'd sit down, and then he'd play his music. He had shelves like this filled with, it was like Sam Goody's record shop.
Oh, wow.
And he would start playing music, and I would listen. And he would play something, and it was gorgeous. And then he'd go over and I said, wait a minute, I love that. He said, and he put on another record, you know. And we never really had a conversation, but there was a kind of something there, you know. Even when I used to go with her to their home, he would go into his study, and I'd follow him in, and I'd sit down, and he'd play some more records, you know. He was a strange man. He was, in a way, he could be very strong. In another way, he was rather shy, socially. If you went to their house and sat in their kitchen, he was the one that made the tea that served everybody.
Oh, wow.
Whether you didn't ask for it, he just went and got it. And, you know, he weighed on people that way. But in other ways, he was, not standoffish, but, you know, formidable. But he was very important to me, to my acting, because even though he crucified me when I got up and tried to be a smart ass, and they had an exercise that he wanted you to sing a song and not move, not try to sell the song, not do anything, just to see if you could sing a song, I'm just not moved to see. I think he was looking for emotional responses. Well, I got up and I sat on the edge of the stage and sang Making Whoopee, you know. And he just looked at me and said, you know, I look at you and I don't know what to do with you. And he just laid me out, you know, a couple of times like that. Till finally I got rid of all that showbiz nonsense that I had learned when I was a kid, or thought I was supposed to do, and finally got down to the point where I was able to present myself on the stage, you know, in a scene the way I was. He taught me how to do that, to get rid of all that theatricality nonsense. Right. So he was very important to me, and Bonnie. But Bonnie was already there by that time. I was slow getting there.
That's amazing. So things really started to heat up. You mentioned Zoo's Story, of course. Herb Gardner wrote that role in 1,000 Clowns for you. You were selected by Tennessee Williams to be Brick in Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, and Mike Nichols, of course, cast you in The Graduate. So I've heard you speak, and you kind of talked about it a little bit. You called yourself a hothead during that time period. What did you mean by that?
I was angry. Yeah. I'd gotten a lot of rejections, so I had a kind of a chip on my shoulder, really. And I have that kind of temperament anyway. I'm right, Bonnie? I easily provoked, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, for a little guy, you know, they can be very, you know, few more inches, I might have been a star. Anyway, you know, it was hard for me getting started, so and the rejections made me angry and so forth. But once I got going, and people like Herb would, well, the Zoo Story kind of set me up. It wasn't just the awards, the Obie and the Clarence Stone, but it was that everybody came to see the Zoo Story. You know, Laurence Olivier was out there one night, and awesome. All of this business, and so that kind of put me on the map, so that Herb could easily write a part with me in mind, which was 1,000 Clowns, Albert and 1,000 Clowns, and which he did, and which ran for a year. And so I kind of went on from there, you know. It got me started. So.
Yeah, I heard that you walked out on The Graduate screening because they cut a scene that you were in.
That's the hothead, yeah. Yeah, imagine walking right by Mike Nichols and not even saying anything after you'd seen the thing. Oh, I'm a terrible judge of material. As I said, I thought the Zoo Story was nonsense of one guy sitting on a bench and the other guy talking. 1776, I said, are they out of their minds? We're in the Vietnam War and they're doing 1776? Yeah. I mean, that's not going to go. Okay. So it ran for a couple of years and it went into a film and all that, as did 1,000 Clowns. So I'm a terrible judge of material, and I have to have people talk me into it, like my wife, because I said, you know, this flag waving, we're in Vietnam where we shouldn't be, and we're going to, you know, I thought we would. And what happened was in Boston, the well-known critic had reservations about 1776. And in New Haven, there was a huge storm, so we didn't get much of a review there. So that when we went to Washington, it wasn't until we hit Washington that I realized that we had something on our hands here, because everybody came. The whole Senate practically came. I mean, Ted Kennedy brought his kids backstage, and there were all these people. And then I realized that we really had a big show on our hands.
Great show.
Well, you know, it seems to have a life of its own. I'm very pleased that I hear that they show it in schools, they use it in history classes, and it's had a life of its own, really. And John Adams.
You still get mail?
Oh, yeah, I get mail all the time. I get mail from teachers who teach it in class, and I get mail from other people about it. It's had a life of its own, and it was a long time ago that we did the show, and we still get mail on it. So it's been amazing. It's been amazing to me. It was a show that gave me a great deal of pleasure because John Adams was on the stage at all times, and although it was in the long run hard to do with 9 musical numbers and practically never leaving the stage, I don't think he does. But there was a sense, it gave me a sense of I don't know, power.
Yeah.
You're on that stage by yourself, and the audience is rustling around with the things, and you walk out in front of a thing, in front of a closed curtain, and start yelling, "By God, I hate this Congress," you know.
Yeah.
And you go at it, and pretty soon you can hear a pin drop, and that's a great sense of power.
Yeah.
You say to yourself, I got him in my hands. That's before the curtain opens up, you know, and they'll say, "Oh, John," and off we go. And so it was a pleasure to do that role, and it gave me a great, what would you call it, sense that I was able to fulfill that role, you know.
Yeah.
And it meant a lot to me. Yeah.
Now that brings me to the time in your career where you really started to heat up, and it's interesting because I think that you had to get to a certain age really to
Yes.
kind of fulfill those roles, because you've kind of become the stern but fair father figure. That's kind of what you're known for. You're either
Yes.
playing the teacher, the important teacher, or you're playing the life-saving doctor, or the authoritative computer voice,
Yes.
or you're the founding father, quite
Yes.
literally
Yes,
the dad.
This insecure person is playing all these parts. I mean,
What is it about you that makes you?
I don't know. I really, I have a certain intensity, and so that works well for a Dr. Craig, or even a John Adams, and that intensity helps me do those kinds of roles. I don't do romantic roles. I'm too short for that. Not only too short, I wouldn't be able to do it, period. But, you know, it fits. My temperament I've been able to use my own temperament in these parts, so it comes naturally to me. And so I don't get caught making believe, theatrical believe. I think I'm fairly believable because I'm using a great deal of myself, and that's what serves me in those parts. As you say, they're a certain type of part, and that's what it's been.
Okay, so of course you played John Adams, and then you also played his son, the 6th president, John Quincy Adams, and you played Samuel Adams.
I had a lock on the Adamses.
The Adams family. What did you learn playing those parts?
History. Yeah. People sent me all kinds of books about the Adamses, and I read them. They were an incredible family. And or if you read the John Adams and Abigail, she was an extraordinary woman.
Yeah.
You read those letters; they're terribly interesting. And he was a difficult man. He as I read in one place, he always felt he had never said enough, you know. So he talked a lot, and he was on the floor a lot. And they captured that certainly in the play, because I was up and down, everybody, you know, and Howard Da Silva would, playing Ben Franklin, would doze off, which was fine. He was supposed to. But when he started snoring, I knew he was not being helpful, so I'd go over with the cane and go whack on this table. And that was a feeling that I had. I could do anything. Mm-hmm. That wasn't in the play, and he was just trying to be naughty,
Yeah.
you know. Howard had a lot of that in him. I loved him. He was a great guy. But if he could, he could try to steal the scene from me, you know. In rehearsals, I'd have Adams and Franklin had these exchanges and so forth, and he up against me, put his arm around my shoulder, and would talk and everything. And I'd come off from rehearsal, and I'm standing next to the guy who played the messenger boy, and I said, "Man, I'm tired." And he said, "That's because he's leaning on you." Because he's over 6 feet and he's 250 pounds, yeah. And he's literally leaning on you. So I had a cane, right? So the next time the scene came up, and he comes like this, and I put the cane up to protect myself.
That's awesome. That's great. Now, you were nominated for a Tony for Best Supporting Actor, but you turned it down because clearly you were the lead. Do you ever regret turning down that Tony?
No, I don't regret it. I felt really quite justified, and the problem was that we opened in the spring, mm-hmm. And although he wouldn't admit it, the producer that ran the thing, because the producers had an association where they picked out the plays, they had already decided to fill the category of leading role. But because we opened late in the spring, it was already decided. So when they offered me a supporting role, I said no, thank you. And the producer, whose name I won't mention, called me and said, "Bill, what do you do?" I said, "Who am I supporting?"
Yeah.
He said, "Well, you know, that category is already filled." I said, "Fine, but I'm not gonna." He said, "You mean you're not coming to the awards?" I said, "No." And I didn't, because I represented 1776. It was a latecomer. They didn't expect it to be such a hit. And I was playing the leading role, really. There was no getting around that. So they either should have given me a leading role nomination or forget about it. So I had them forget about it. I said, "No, I won't be there, but you know, you better take my name off." He said, "Well, now I only have 4. I said, "Well, that's your problem." Yeah. 4. He wanted 5 people up for that award. So yeah, I turned that down. I didn't go to that. It didn't bother me. Well, it did, but I wasn't about to back down on that. It was wrong for the play. Yeah. You know, it didn't represent the play the way it should.
And somebody from the play won.
Oh, really?
And yeah, 1776 won as the best play.
And Ron for the supporting.
And yes.
Nice. Yeah, you would have been competing against him unfairly because you would have.
I know.
So St. Elsewhere launched the careers of Denzel Washington, Howie Mandel, Mark Harmon, David Morse. Yeah. Now, that role was originally supposed to be for an inner city Italian guy, but they gave you the role. And it was kind of a smaller role at first and got bigger. What comes into creating a character like Dr. Mark Craig?
I don't know the history of that. Was it a smaller? Oh.
They were going to put
yes.
Italian.
I tell you what, Bruce Paltrow, who I knew because of Blythe, who had been in the film of 1776, called me and said, I'm sending over 5 scripts, and the part is Dr. Craig, and if you want it, it's yours. So I read the scripts, and I called him back, and I said, well, they're wonderful scripts. I said, but it's a very small part. He said, Billy, this is a quote, Billy, when the writers see what you do with it, they're going to write it.
Wow.
And I said, okay. So that's the way it came about. And that's what happened, really. It got so important a role that they had a wife in one scene where I was expecting to get the Surgeon of the Year award, which I never got. And I had my wife there. And I had in a previous scene told them how I got her to stop smoking, stood out in the lawn and yelled. So the whole neighborhood heard me about smoking. And at the awards, I get up to go to the men's room and she pulls out a cigarette. And that was a big laugh. And then they thought, oh, they thought, who should we get for your wife, you know?
Yeah.
And they went around and around, and finally the casting lady said, why not his wife?
Yeah.
You know, she's an actress, you know. And so she had that little scene, but it went so well, she became one of the regulars.
Yeah,
and
you guys.
And they gave her a lot of stuff, you know.
Mm-hmm.
She wasn't always faithful to me and things like that.
And you played husband and wife 3 times on television.
Did we?
Yeah, there was, Boy Meets World, and then Touched by an Angel as well.
Oh, Touched by an Angel. I forgot about that. Yeah.
So simultaneously to that role, you were also the voice of K.I.T.T.
Yes. Well, therein lies a story.
Yeah.
The producer. Am I boring you, Bonnie?
No, no.
You've heard this story so
No,
long,
tell me about the
many
book.
times.
This is all in the book.
This is all in my
Yes.
memoir. She wants me to mention the memoir. Okay, it's all in the memoir. The memoir is called I'm Still Here. What?
It is called
Still at play.
Still at Play.
I'm Still Here is Ethel Merman's number in
I know.
Gypsy.
Yes.
It's not Ethel Merman. It's not Ethel Merman. It's from something else.
Okay.
Still at play.
Still at Play.
Yeah.
From William Butler Yeats.
My 75 years.
Yeah.
My 75 years in show business and the roles that America embraced. Still at Play. Knight Rider.
Oh, Knight Rider. So I had done a movie of the week with Bernadette Peters, and we did a funny couple of scenes. And this producer calls me and said, Bill, would you do me a favor? I have a couple of lines. He says, there's a couple of pages that I need to record to take to New York to pitch to the sponsors, or the networks, I guess it was. And I said, sure. So I went over. He hands me, and I look at it. And I say, this is the voice of a car? He says, yes. I said, oh, okay. So I start reading. He said, how about making it a robot? I said, no. I start reading a bit more. How about like that Bill? I said, would you just let me read it, please? So I just read it for myself, you know, which was the only way to read it anyway, because if you try to do a robot or a Ma Bell voice, you're going to get stuck. You know, all expressivity is out the window. So I just read it by myself, and then I forgot about it. And 3 weeks later, he calls me, and he said, we sold it. Will you do the part? I said, well, you know, I'm doing St. Elsewhere. Because I thought a voice of a car was ridiculous. He said, yes, NBC knows that you're doing that, but we'll work around your schedule. So I said, okay. And it ran for 4 seasons.
Yeah. So you'd be doing open heart surgery, and then you'd be helping David Hasselhoff fight against a giant monster truck.
Well, he used to. I never see him, until the Christmas party. He said, "Damn you! I'm out in the desert sweating, and all you do is walk. How long does it take you to do it?" I said, "About 50 minutes to an hour."
That's amazing. So you have a whole new generation that embraced you too through Boy Meets World, where you play the teacher/neighbor of the boy who I presume was meeting the world. Despite having a long and storied career, I think maybe Mr. Feeney might be your legacy that people will remember you for. What is it about Mr. Feeney that people love so much?
I honestly don't know. He's their teacher. He's their mentor. I get mail saying, "I had a teacher just like that." I get mail saying, "I am a teacher and I'm trying to do what you do." It's amazing. To this day, I get mail, and it's years ago that we did this show. Just recently, Disney wanted from Michael Jacobs, who was the producer of the show, to do something like Boy Meets World because it was so popular. So he did Girl Meets World and asked me to come on and, do a couple of scenes and stuff like that. And I think he's going to I know he's going to ask me again in May to do something else on the show, because Feeney is, I don't know, I have people who say, "Feeney," on the street. And I said, "Yeah, it was just a part that seemed to have a life of its own."
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll tell you, when I told my friends and family that I was interviewing you, they all wanted to know about Mr. Feeney.
About Mr. Feeney. Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, Michael, when he first approached me about it, and the name sounded kind of funny, I said no. I read the script and I said no, and he asked me to come into the office. He said, "We're going to change this whole thing, and I think it'll be acceptable to you." I said, "Michael, I think teachers in this country are underpaid. I think it's a scandal.
Yeah.
And I don't want to play any of these comic characters. I think that teachers deserve more respect than being made fun of." And he said, "I had no intention of doing that." He said, "I'm basing this character on a mentor of mine who I knew in high school and who had a lot of influence over me." I said, "Oh, okay." And he did do that.
That's awesome.
He didn't make fun of the part or anything like that. And so the part became a kind of thing that people respect and enjoy at the same time, because there's humor to it. But he never made fun of the part, and I never played it that way. And I think that's the way it should have gone, and or it wouldn't have been as good as it turned out to be.
Yeah.
Chalkskin.
Yo, that was a cool video, right? So do me a favor. Hit like, hit share, hit subscribe. Not at the same time, because your computer will explode.
In 1969, you began your 954 shows of 1776. So now I saw the beginning of it. I didn't get to the end. What happens, without giving too many spoilers away, did they successfully declare independence?
Just.
That interview was so cool. I think I'm gonna rap about it. Click here. Check out the rap. It's so dope.
If you'd like to know more about William Daniels, I'm so excited about this. He has a memoir coming out called Still at Play, My 75 Years in Show Business and the Roles That America Embraced. And I personally can't wait to read it. If you want to know more about the book or about Mr. Daniels, you can follow him on Twitter or Facebook. It's at Mr. Bill Daniels. That's at Mr. Bill Daniels, Facebook and Twitter. Thank you so much, Bill.
Thank you.